Violet, 28, stands in the middle of an empty living room, sunlight streaming through the blinds, casting soft shadows on the hardwood floor where dust outlines mark the absence of furniture. This house, her home for the past 5 years, was once the dream her father poured his heart into rebuilding before a sudden heart attack took him. Now, it's a hollow shell, stripped of the TV, coffee table, dining chairs, everything she'd bought, assembled, and cherished. They're gone, loaded onto a moving truck that left this morning. She takes a deep breath, a mix of relief and bitterness washing over her. This isn't her home anymore. Not because she chose to leave, but because she was pushed out. 5 years ago, when her father died, Violet stayed, not out of desire, but duty. Her mother, Helen, fell apart. For weeks after the funeral, Helen sat staring at blank walls, eyes red, barely speaking. Violet remembers holding her mother's hand in the unfinished kitchen, where her father had excitedly picked out tiles just days before. He'd said, "Girls, take care of your mom. She needs love and patience." Violet listened. She turned down a promotion in Seattle, passed on company housing with cheap rent and a 15-minute commute. She stayed, paid the mortgage, cleaned the gutters, cooked dinners, and tried to be her mother's anchor. But at what cost? Constant comparisons. Why can't you be more like Josie? She lights up a room. You dress like you're heading to jury duty. Or, you should try dating again. Violet, it's not too late, even for someone like you. Those words, small but sharp, cut into her self-worth. Josie, her younger sister, was the golden child, with glossy hair, a dazzling smile, and an Instagram-perfect life. She was their mother's pride. At 22, Josie left to marry Brent, a handsome man whose only skill was looking sharp in a blazer. She was the star of every family gathering, while Violet faded into the background. Violet didn't always resent it. She believed that if she kept showing up, kept trying, her mother would see her worth. She was wrong. Everything changed on a Thursday afternoon. Violet came home late, exhausted from a shipping delay at work, and walked into a scene that felt like a punch to the gut. Josie sat curled on the living room couch, tissues crumpled in her lap. Brent lounged beside her, scrolling his phone with a bored expression. Helen hovered with a tray of tea and shortbread cookies, like they were visiting royalty. "Violet," her mother chirped, as if Violet were a neighbor dropping by. "Guess who's back?" Violet glanced at Josie, then Brent, then back to her mother. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice calm but wary. Josie sniffled, explaining that Brent lost his job. His company downsized, cutting his entire department. They couldn't pay rent, and their landlord gave them 2 weeks to vacate. They have nowhere to go. Helen added quickly, her arm already around Josie. "So, they're moving in." Violet felt her blood run cold. "Moving in? Here? I live here, Mom." Helen waved her off, as if it were a minor detail. "You'll figure it out. You're good at that." Violet pulled her mother aside, struggling to stay calm. "This house barely fits 2 adults. Let alone 4. Where are they supposed to sleep?" Helen met her eyes, unflinching. "In your room. You can take the guest room or move out. Your choice." Violet blinked, stunned. "Are you serious? I've been paying the mortgage for years." Helen shrugged. "The house is in my name. And you've always acted like you're doing me some big favor. I never asked you to." Violet wanted to scream that Helen had been a wreck after her father's death, unable to function without her. But she stood there, silent, as her mother added, "I've always wanted Josie back. She belongs here. I don't need you anymore." The words hit like a slap. Violet returned to her room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of her bed. On the bookshelf, a dusty manila folder caught her eye. It was the company housing offer she declined to stay with her mother. Her hands trembled as she opened it. A studio apartment, clean, safe, near work, a move-in bonus. No arguments, no guilt, no Josie. She picked up the phone and made the call. Within 24 hours, she'd filed for a transfer, secured a key, and scheduled movers. Saturday morning arrived. A warm breeze rustled the blinds as Violet stood in the driveway. dressed in jeans and a t-shirt. Hair in a ponytail, clipboard in hand. The moving truck pulled up, and the movers stepped out, surprised by the stack of boxes already waiting by the porch. Ready for the big move? One asked with a grin. Yeah, Violet said, exhaling. Let's get started. They loaded her bed, bookshelves, coffee maker, desk, dishes. With each item, she felt lighter, stronger, freer. She didn't rush. She wanted to savor every moment of this newfound freedom. When a mover paused by the door and raised an eyebrow, asking, "You're really taking everything?" Violet smiled, calm and unapologetic. Yes, everything. She looked at the house, now empty, with only dust outlines where her furniture once stood. Everything she'd bought with her own paychecks. She took. She left nothing behind but the harsh truth for those who'd pushed her out. The moving truck rumbled down the street, carrying Violet's life in neatly packed boxes. She followed in her car, the rearview mirror reflecting the house shrinking into the distance. For the first time in years, her chest felt unburdened, like she'd shed a heavy coat she hadn't realized she was wearing. The studio apartment waiting for her was small, but it promised something the house never had: peace. No slammed doors, no whispered insults, no expectations to be anyone but herself. As she pulled into the parking lot of the company housing complex, the late afternoon sun glinted off the building's glass windows. The movers were already unloading, their voices echoing lightly in the quiet lot. Violet stepped out, clutching her keys, and felt a flicker of something new: hope. Inside, the apartment was modest but bright. White walls, a single window overlooking a small courtyard, a compact kitchen with a fridge that didn't hum like a dying engine. She directed the movers to place her furniture, the bed against the far wall, the bookshelf by the window, the desk in the corner. Each piece settled into place like a puzzle completing itself. When the movers left, she stood in the center of the room, hands on her hips, taking it all in. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. She made tea in her own kettle, sat on her own mattress, and watched the city lights flicker to life outside. For the first time in years, she didn't brace for criticism or interruption. She just breathed. Her phone buzzed relentlessly that evening: missed calls, voicemails, texts from Helen, then Josie, then Brent. The messages started angry, demanding she explain herself, then shifted to confusion, as if they couldn't fathom why she'd left. Violet didn't listen to them. She turned her phone off, sipped her tea, and let the silence wrap around her like a warm blanket. This was her space, her rules. No one could take that away. By Monday, the storm arrived. The front desk at her workplace called down to the loading bay where she was overseeing a shipment. Violet? Your mom and sister are here." She almost laughed. She hadn't given them her new address. But of course they'd tracked her to her job. She stayed in the bay, surrounded by crates and clipboards, until they gave up and left. She wasn't ready for a confrontation, not on their terms. Let them stew, she thought. Let them feel what it's like to be ignored. That evening, curiosity tugged at her. She drove by the house, the one she'd poured her savings and soul into. The porch light glowed, but the living room was dark. She knocked once, then let herself in with the spare key she hadn't returned. Helen and Josie were in the kitchen, arms crossed, faces like thunderclouds. Helen didn't waste a second. "What the hell did you do?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Violet leaned against the counter, calm. "What are you talking about?" "You cleaned the place out," Helen snapped. "There's nothing left, no fridge, no table, not even the toaster." Violet nodded. "Those were mine. I bought them, like I bought everything else." Josie stepped forward, her brows furrowed, her voice tight. "You can't just take things without permission." Violet raised an eyebrow. "I didn't. You assumed they were yours. That doesn't make them true." Helen's face reddened. "We didn't think you'd take literally everything. The house feels like a shell. It's depressing." Violet's lips twitched. Not quite a smile. "I'm sorry. Is the house I paid for not comfortable enough without my stuff?" Josie's eyes narrowed, and she shifted gears. "What about the bank account? Dad's insurance money was in there, wasn't it? I checked yesterday. It's empty." Violet let out a slow breath. Seeing the trap they were trying to set. That money was gone years ago. I've been covering the mortgage myself for the last 4 years. Josie froze. No way. There was, like, 40 grand in there. I saw it once. That wasn't insurance money, Violet said, her voice steady. That was my savings. Portions of my paychecks. I used it to keep this house afloat, mortgage, utilities, everything. Josie's face paled, but she pressed on. Why does it matter? You're not on the deed. It's not your house. Violet tilted her head, her calm unshaken. Exactly. So why are you so mad about what I took? Helen's expression flickered, surprise. Then panic. Josie turned to her, voice rising. Is she lying? Mom, tell me she's lying. Helen looked away, her silence deafening. Josie's hands clenched into fists. You told me the insurance payout was still there. That if we came back, we'd be okay. That we could use it to get back on our feet. Violet watched, stunned, as the pieces fell into place. You came back for money, she said, her voice low but cutting. Not for family, not for Mom, for money. Josie rounded on her, all pretense gone. You think we moved in for bonding time? Brent and I are drowning in debt. He got fired 2 months ago. We've been maxing out credit cards. You think I wanted to sleep in my childhood bed again? Helen tried to interject, her voice weak. She didn't mean it like. Josie cut her off. Yes, I did. I meant every word. I wouldn't be here if you hadn't promised there was money. Helen's face drained of color. Josie pointed at Violet. And you took every last thing in this house and left us with nothing but empty promises. Violet crossed her arms. No, I left you with exactly what you gave me. Nothing. Josie's lips trembled, her voice cracking. The insurance money was supposed to be shared. Violet's eyes narrowed. You mean the money you never contributed to? The money you thought you'd inherit without lifting a finger? Josie's voice broke. We wouldn't be in this mess if you hadn't emptied the house. Violet shook her head. You wouldn't be in this mess if you hadn't banked your future on a lie. Josie turned back to Helen, her rage palpable. You said it was still there. Helen's voice was barely audible. I thought we'd figure it out later. Josie let out a bitter laugh. Later. That's all you ever say. Later. Soon. Eventually. You told me to come home. You said we'd be fine. Helen whispered. I missed you. Josie's eyes flashed. No. You missed having someone to lean on. Someone who made you feel important. You never cared what I needed. Violet stood there, watching them unravel each other. Josie paced, her heels clicking on the bare floor. Helen stammered, her hands twisting together. They were realizing the same thing at the same time. There was no plan. Only delusion. Brent hadn't come home since a fight the day before. Josie had maxed out her 3rd credit card. Helen had no savings. The house still had 6 years left on the mortgage. And the only person who'd been holding it all together, Violet, was gone. Josie's voice dropped to a desperate whisper. You said we could use that money to start over. Violet cut in, her tone flat. There is no money. There hasn't been for years. Josie's face crumpled, like a child learning a harsh truth. What about the file folder? Dad's paperwork? Violet shook her head. Gone. Mom used most of it for the bathroom remodel. Then the kitchen. Then she bought you that used Lexus when you got married. Josie spun to Helen. Tell me that's not true. Silence. Tell me. Helen stared at the floor, her voice a whisper. I didn't want to worry you. Josie let out a strangled noise and stormed toward the hall, clutching a torn envelope she'd found in a drawer. Violet watched, her heart steady but heavy. They'd kicked her out expecting comfort, backup, and cash. Instead, they got an empty house, a mountain of debt, and no one to blame but themselves. Josie stood frozen in the hallway, clutching the torn envelope like it was a lifeline, her knuckles white. The kitchen was silent except for the faint hum of the neighbor's lawnmower outside. A stark reminder of the normalcy beyond these walls. Helen sat at the table, her face buried in her hands, shoulders trembling. Violet leaned against the counter, her expression unreadable but resolute. The air was thick with unspoken accusations, each woman grappling with the wreckage of their choices. Violet broke the silence. her voice steady but laced with a quiet intensity. You thought I'd stay and fix this, didn't you? That I'd clean up your mess like I've done for years. Helen's head snapped up, her eyes glossy with unshed tears. Please, Violet, help us. You're the only one who knows how to fix things. Violet's jaw tightened. You called me a parasite. You told me to get out. Remember? Helen's voice cracked. I was angry. I didn't mean it. Violet's gaze didn't waver. Yes, you did. And now you're exactly where you put yourself. Josie spun around, her face a mix of fury and desperation. It's empty, she said, holding up the envelope, her voice low and bitter. There's nothing, not even old bills. Violet nodded. I know, I checked. Years ago. Helen let out a choked sob, her hands gripping the edge of the table. I don't understand. What are we supposed to do now? Violet didn't answer immediately. She let the question hang. Let it sink into the hollow space where her furniture used to be. The mortgage, Helen continued, her voice rising with panic. The bills, the food. We don't even have a blender or a microwave anymore. Violet's tone was calm, almost detached. Those were mine. All of it was mine. Helen's eyes widened, as if the reality was only now dawning. You could have left something. Violet's lips curled into a faint, humorless smile. You left me with nothing. Just memories of being told I was second best. Years of pretending I didn't hear you call me dull. Plain. A burden. Josie's face twisted, her voice sharp. And you told me there'd be money. She said, turning on Helen. You said Dad left enough for a fresh start. That Brent and I could pay off our cards. Violet's eyes flicked between them, her voice cutting through. Both of you. But the difference is, I stopped believing her years ago. Helen's mouth opened, then closed. No words coming out. Violet reached into her tote bag and pulled out a white envelope, placing it on the counter with deliberate care. What's this? Josie asked, her voice weary but suspicious. My last mortgage receipt, Violet said. The loan's still in your name. Mom, you'll need to cover it now. 6 more years. Fixed rate. Payments aren't bad, unless you're unemployed and broke. Josie's eyes flashed. You can't expect us to pay this. Violet shrugged. I don't expect anything. I'm done expecting. I just wanted to leave you the facts. Since fantasy hasn't worked out so well. Josie's teeth clenched, her voice venomous. You're heartless. Violet met her gaze, unflinching. You came back for money. Josie. Not for Mom. Not for love. Not even desperation. You banked on a lie and used people to cover your losses. Don't pretend this is about family. Josie's face flushed, but she fired back. Oh, and you're a saint? You abandoned your mother after everything she's been through. Violet let out a dry laugh. No, I stayed for years. I paid for her home. Groceries, gas, medical bills, insurance, her little renovations. I gave her my 20s. And she threw me out the second you showed up. I didn't abandon her. She traded me. Helen flinched, her hands trembling. Josie looked shaken, but her anger quickly resurfaced. I can't believe you're just walking away. Violet's voice was steady, almost serene. You should be grateful. I could have emptied the savings account before I left. But I didn't, because unlike both of you, I still had an ounce of decency left. Helen's voice was a whisper. You're cruel. Violet shook her head. No, I'm free. She turned toward the door. But Josie's voice stopped her. Good. We don't need you. I'll figure something out. Brent's talking to a guy about a job. Violet paused, hand on the doorknob, and glanced back. I'm sure he is. Gambling's a tough industry to break into. Josie cursed under her breath. But Violet didn't flinch. Take care of each other, she said. You wanted her, Mom. Now live with her. The door clicked shut behind her. The sound final, like a chapter closing. Violet walked to her car. The night air cool against her skin. She didn't look back. The weight of the house, of her mother's expectations, of Josie's entitlement, it was gone. She drove to her apartment, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold and white. Inside, she kicked off her shoes, made tea, and sat on her balcony, the quiet wrapping around her like a promise kept. Days turned into weeks. Violet settled into her new life. Each day a small act of reclaiming herself. She hung a print on the wall, a vibrant abstract painting she'd bought on a whim. Something her mother would have called garish. She cooked meals she liked. Spicy stir-fries and rich pastas. Without worrying about anyone's complaints. At work, she threw herself into her projects. Her focus sharper than ever. Her manager noticed, pulling her aside one morning with a smile. "There's a lead position opening up. You'd be perfect for it." Violet didn't hesitate. "I'm in," she said, her voice steady with newfound confidence. Meanwhile, whispers from old neighbors reached her. The house had gone on the market. It sat for 2 weeks. Untouched. Until someone lowballed Helen and Josie, and they had no choice but to accept. They'd moved into a cramped one-bedroom apartment across town. Josie was working part-time at a bakery. Her Instagram-perfect life reduced to flour-dusted aprons and early mornings. Helen had taken an admin job at a dentist's office. Her days filled with filing and forced smiles. Brent, predictably, hadn't landed the job he'd bragged about. Violet heard he'd been spending nights at a friend's place, leaving Josie and Helen to navigate their new reality alone. Violet didn't gloat, but she couldn't deny the quiet satisfaction. They'd expected her to crumble, to come crawling back with apologies and solutions. Instead, she'd built something better, a life that was hers alone. She started small rituals. Saturday mornings at a cafe her mother once called pretentious. Reading novels she'd never had time for. Sipping cappuccinos in peace. She caught herself smiling for no reason. A lightness she hadn't felt in years. One evening, as she watered a new plant on her windowsill, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Violet, it's Mom. Can we talk?" She stared at the screen, her thumb hovering over the reply button. Part of her wanted to answer, to hear what Helen would say now that the fantasy had collapsed. But another part, the stronger part, knew better. She set the phone down, turned it to silent, and went back to her plant. The leaves were green, vibrant, alive, like her. Weeks blurred into months, and Violet's new life took on a rhythm that felt both foreign and exhilarating. The studio apartment, once a blank canvas, now burst with personal touches she'd never allowed herself before. She painted one wall a deep teal, a color her mother would have dismissed as too bold, and filled shelves with books she'd collected over the years. Spines worn from late-night escapes. Mornings started with yoga in the courtyard below her window, the sun warming her skin as she stretched away the remnants of old tensions. No more rushing to make breakfast for ungrateful mouths or tiptoeing around moods that weren't her own. She brewed strong coffee in her machine, the one she'd taken from the house, and savored it slowly, flipping through news apps or journaling thoughts that had long been suppressed. At work, the lead position proved to be a game changer. Her manager had seen potential in her during those first weeks after the move. When her focus sharpened like a blade. "You've got a fire in you now, Violet," he'd said during her performance review, handing her a folder with project details. The role involved overseeing a team on supply chain optimizations, drawing on her years of experience in logistics. She thrived, leading meetings with confidence she'd built from scratch, negotiating with vendors who respected her straightforward approach. Bonuses came in, allowing her to splurge on small luxuries, a new laptop, weekend getaways to nearby hiking trails, even a cooking class where she learned to make artisanal bread, ironically. Something Josie might envy from her bakery job. One afternoon, as she reviewed spreadsheets in her office, her phone vibrated with another unknown number. This time, it was Josie. Violet hesitated, her finger hovering over the decline button. But curiosity won. She answered, keeping her voice neutral. "What do you want, Josie?" The line crackled with silence before Josie spoke, her tone a mix of defiance and weariness. "Mom's not doing well. The apartment's too small, and the job at the dentist's is killing her back. We need help." Violet leaned back in her chair, staring at the city skyline through the window. "Help? Like what, exactly?" Josie sighed. "Money. Or maybe you could co-sign a loan. We sold the house at a loss. Violet, we're barely scraping by." Violet felt a surge of emotions, pity, anger, but mostly detachment. "You sold the house I kept afloat for years. And now you want me to bail you out? Josie's voice sharpened. You owe us. Dad would have wanted us to stick together. Violet laughed. A sound devoid of humor. Dad wanted us to take care of Mom, and I did. For 5 years. You showed up for a handout and kicked me to the curb. The conversation devolved from there. Josie hurling accusations of selfishness. Violet countering with facts about the insurance money squandered on frivolities like the Lexus and renovations. You knew about the debt. Josie. Brent's gambling didn't help, did it? Josie went silent, then hung up. Violet set the phone down. Her hands steady. No guilt this time, just clarity. To add depth to her independence, Violet dove into new hobbies. Drawing from online communities she'd discovered. Inspired by stories of women reclaiming their lives after toxic family dynamics, tales she read on forums like redditstories, raised by narcissists, or articles from Psychology Today about setting boundaries, she joined a local book club. There, she met people who shared similar scars, a divorcee rebuilding her career, a young professional escaping overbearing parents. One evening, over wine and discussions of empowering novels, she opened up about her story. They thought I was the weak one, she said, her voice steady, but leaving was the strongest thing I've done. The group nodded, sharing their own triumphs, and for the first time, Violet felt seen not as the dutiful daughter, but as a survivor. Brent's absence became a punchline in neighborhood gossip that trickled back to her through mutual acquaintances. He'd skipped town after a blowout argument with Josie, leaving behind unpaid bills and a trail of excuses. Josie, now single and scrambling, had taken on extra shifts at the bakery. Her once glossy Instagram filled with filtered photos of pastries masking the exhaustion. Helen, meanwhile, had started therapy, forced by the realities of her new life, but progress was slow. Violet learned this not from direct contact, but from a cousin who called out of the blue. Concerned, they're struggling. Maybe reach out? Violet politely declined. They made their choices. So did I. As autumn leaves turned gold, Violet planned her first solo trip, a weekend in Seattle, the city she'd once sacrificed for family. Walking the streets, visiting Pike Place Market, she reflected on what could have been, and what now was. The promotion she'd turned down years ago paled in comparison to her current path. Back home, she hosted a small gathering for her book club friends. The apartment alive with laughter and shared stories. No comparisons, no judgments, just genuine connection. One crisp morning, as she sipped cappuccino at her favorite cafe, the one her mother deemed pretentious, her phone buzzed again. This time, a voicemail from Helen. Violet, it's Mom. I miss you. Not just what you did for me, but you. Please call. Violet listened, her heart softening just a fraction. But she deleted it. Forgiveness might come one day. But not yet. Not while the wounds were still healing into strength. It's been months now, and Violet's life is a testament to resilience. The house that once confined her is a distant memory, replaced by freedom she earned. Josie and Helen navigate their downsized world, learning hard lessons about dependency and deceit. Brent? Who knows? Probably chasing another scheme. But Violet? She's thriving. Her smile genuine, her steps light. They thought she was disposable. A placeholder. In truth, she was the foundation. Now, with them gone, she's built an empire of one, peaceful, prosperous, and profoundly her own.